Hey, good evening. Welcome to the Privy Council, the unplugged, the acoustic version of the Privy Council. What you've got tonight is I want you to think about it this way. You've gone down to your favorite pub. In this case, in our case, in the Duchy, it's called the Bear and Wolf. And there's a bunch of guys there, and you want to talk about what a shitty week you're having in the context of sort of where we are as a society, as a country, maybe even by extension, a planet. And you want to talk about that with people who you're comfortable with. And as far as I know, we have no feds in the house, so that's good. And then we're gonna talk about a few of these topics just to get sort of things rolling. But this show today is really about viewer participation, and so let me stop for a minute before we get into introductions and so forth, and ask Watcher to be kind enough to, if you don't remember it from the last time, and frankly I don't, but if you don't remember it from the last time, I'm going to have Watcher explain to you how, at the appropriate time, you can join the stream and ask us. And today it can be whatever. This is Open Line Wednesday, so we don't have to care about it. You have to care about it, and we'll try to do our best in terms of fielding questions and comments from the crew. But Washer does have his finger on a kill switch, so let's behave, okay? So Watcher, take it away. Tell the folks what they won.
Okay. All right. So let's start from the very top. Let's assume that you're here for the very first time. You've never heard of either of these places, and you're not a member of our Gilded. You need to go join our Gilded first. Gilded is exactly like Discord, only not run by rampant leftists. The link I'm sending you should send you there. Once you're in our Gilded, go to the chat room titled Privy Council Waiting Room. And all you have to do at that point is just say hi or here or present. Just let me know that you're wanting to participate and that you're in that chat room, and I will add you to the queue. At which point I will, when I'm ready, I'll DM you, and then we'll set up a little one-on-one chat so that I can test your sound and mic setup, and then screen your question. And then once we're done with that, I send you the link to actually join us here on StreamYards.
Hey, Watcher, I'm not trying to rewrite this, but I have a question for the folks.
Go for it.
Is it when they sign into the Gilded room,
Mhm.
if they presage what they want to talk about, that gives you the opportunity to prioritize a little bit, would it not? Not just here I'm here, but here I'm here and I want to talk about whatever.
Sure. I just I like the whole first come, first checked out sort of thing. But
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm just we'll take it on first come, first serve then. So you'll probably start seeing some folks in the not too distant future in terms of
one of them actually
checking
checked in
into the
before the show started.
Okay. Camping out. That's good. Good to know. Good to know. Joe Dolio, present and accounted for. Drinking Jack Daniel's apple whiskey with
Got my good friend Dr. Jameson with me.
You're
There was no mute button
Dr.
thing. You just weren't
Jameson?
listening. Yep.
I see. I'm guilty of that from time to time. If you don't know what we're talking about, Watcher's probably got this handy. But Jack Daniels has come out with a couple of trans promotions.
Oh, I just
which
put a
has
new
lot
meme
of
up there we should show. Yeah.
Okay, it just sort of got me a little gobsmacked in terms of what the airs. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I find interesting about this is that it's Anheuser-Busch and Jack Daniels. It's not two fly-by-night. Yeah, two fly-by-night companies looking to get attention on the back of this stuff. It's really established brand names with brand value, at least to certain cohorts, and they're really sort of, in my estimation, I think they're making a mistake, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Watcher, if you scroll up to the top there, that up to that thread, you'll see the actual ad. There it is.
Yeah,
that's one, and then there's another one.
So my comment on the first of those is that's pretty biblical. You've got this trans thingy tempting you with an apple thingy that's got whiskey in it underneath an apple tree. I don't see a snake, but it's there somewhere, I'm sure.
Well, the snake's holding the bottle.
Well, okay.
No. That's the point of this whole thing, is that the snake's there. It just doesn't want you to know that the snake is there. We'll move on.
Thank you, Watcher.
That's absolutely correct. So, anyhow, Joe, what's new in your world in Metro Detroit?
Well, I'll tell you, I've survived some pretty rough thunderstorms today. They seem to, for whatever reason, where we live, they just go by either the north or south, just barely. So I've survived. The power stayed on. There was a couple of flickers, but we're good. Got another row coming through, but I guess in the hours since this morning's show, I've held a great Bible study with a good bunch of dudes who are probably all jumping in the chat now to watch, and good stuff going on, man. We're fighting that battle every day.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. Matt,
Building warriors. Yeah.
my brother, what's up, buddy?
Oh, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Celebrating this wonderful Holy Week, taking us into Easter, and really been a great time. Beautiful day here in the great state of North Carolina, and it was nice and warm, gorgeous. Spent most of the day outdoors. Knocked out a podcast, and that one already has 1.5 thousand downloads. But I want to give my wonderful co-hosts in here from the episode 122 a big round of applause. I saw a couple of people in the chat that were mentioning it. That episode got 7.1 thousand downloads, which is a personal record. That is the biggest episode we've ever done on Radio Contra, and it propelled the podcast to trending number one. You know, so if you think anybody out there thinks that your voice doesn't matter, that you don't, that, you know, you throw your hands up, you can't do anything. Let me explain something. You know, I'm a disheveled redneck living out in the middle of the woods in North Carolina with a laptop and a whole lot of pent up anger and too much education for my own good.
And an Adidas tracksuit.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, you can make your voice heard. All right. You can make your voice heard. You can get out there and do it. So I want to challenge everybody out there. If you got something to say, get your voice, right? Get out there, start writing, start a blog, start a podcast, start doing something, make your mark on the world. Don't wait for everybody else to do it. There's a lot of evil in this world, and all it takes for that to succeed is for you to sit down and bend the knee, right? Stand up, be counted. And you will succeed, I promise.
Yeah, no, that's right. You know, and it's funny about that episode because as we were doing it, I think we were aware that it was gonna be good, but I didn't. It was just the most natural thing amongst the three of us. It wasn't like there was some big production value or anything of that nature. It was just kind of what we wanted
like
to do
three
tonight.
dudes sitting around a bonfire, right?
Yeah, it really was. And so it was rewarding to see it picked up at that level, and hopefully we can continue to do things like that resonate.
For the record, people. Matt and I recorded one exactly like that with Brooke on Brooke Talks America. We were literally smoking cigars and drinking whiskey around a campfire when we did that.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were. I forgot all about that. That was seems like it was
hanging out in Michigan.
So speaking of the guy who hath smote evil, woke evil, ESG and diversified evil, we have Blaine Pardoe back for his second appearance here at the Privy Council. And he can quote you chapter and verse as to what to do when somebody tries to cancel you and whatever. And Blaine, I haven't seen you, I guess, since last week. So I'm assuming you've written like 6 more books or whatever it is in that time frame. I mean, you know,
I'm doing real well. Actually, I'm really geeked about next week. I'm going to Best Ranger competition. I have a media pass for that, which is really exciting. I wanted to do some research for the book series that I write for, so I can make sure they're a little more accurate. And I reached out and decided to cash in some of my tax dollars and ask if I could go to Ranger School. And they said, come on down for Best Ranger competition, and we'll assign a Ranger to you for a week to answer any questions you have. So
I have one request. So
Sure.
when I heard this the first time, and you just reminded me of it, I want you to go dressed as the Dennis Hopper character in Apocalypse Now. Okay, to Best Ranger Captain. He's a genius,
yeah.
man. He's a genius, man. Sometimes he doesn't even know he's a genius, man. I mean, I need you to, step it up a little.
I was going to do John Malkovich from, Red, where, the crazy guy with the pig.
Yeah,
where the
that's
stuff
too.
goes.
I like
that
that.
was going to be me.
But I'm not sure that John Malkovich would get you the same reverence that Dennis Hopper would. I mean, I think that would be epic. So.
My wife and I've been joking because their recruitment numbers have been so bad for the Army. She's half worried that they're actually suckering me in, and
you're not making it out of there without.
She's like, "Don't sign any
tab.
paperwork while you're there."
Honey,
Yeah.
I'm in Kharkiv. Don't ask me how I got
I
here.
will point out that the main character in Apocalypse Now was a military police investigator. I'm just throwing that out there.
It's very possible. I'm really excited because I like it when I have to learn stuff so I can be better at my craft.
I'm stoked for you. I think that's going to be fun. I really do. I hope you enjoy.
That
it.
is going to be cool.
So we've got a $20 super chat here, which reminds me that I need to extend best wishes to any of our Jewish brethren who are celebrating Passover this evening. If you're here, I'm surprised you're here. But that's cool too. And so thank you, William, for the $20. And again, happy Passover to everybody. Just remember the brush strokes. You got to get those right as you're painting the lintels. And it's got to be lamb's blood. So those are the two requirements, I think. Speaking as a,
hearing Blaine mention that the Ranger thing, I forgot to mention something. There's a tour with U.S. Patriot Tactical. It's going to be coming around the country, and I've been invited to go on the whole thing. I don't know how much of it I'm going to go on, but we're going to drive a Jeep to various military bases all over the country, and then at the culmination of this, at the end of the summer, we're going to give that Jeep away to a service member. So. They've asked me to give them a hand in promoting it and talking about it. I'm going to join them for as much as I can and get some video, and we'll talk about it. They really want to give back to the veteran and active duty community. So they've asked me for a hand, and I'm going to do it. So more to come.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Very good. Old Hong Kong, Non-Han. What's up?
Good Yontif. All is good. It's we're Easter and Passover. It's a good time for our world. So I'm just very pensive this week. Lots to think about, lots to talk about. So I'm really looking forward. Looking forward to what our friends say.
You're the only guy I know that's got a box score for earthquakes. That's I don't know what's going on with you, but
Hey, Joe, you're talking out of school now, man.
No, I'm just saying.
Joe's the only guy who called me out.
I guarantee you, he's got a Vegas line on it too. He's got a few bucks riding. So
to answer CLM's question in the chat, what is in my glass is some of the very last Ruski Standard vodka in the house. We've been sort of divvying it out as it's impossible to get now in the United States, but I thought this warranted a little Ruski Standard, which is my house vodka. So that's nothing political about it. I just happen to like the vodka, and it's better than Stoli. Before anybody asks, okay. Just understand that, please. Okay, Watcher, what's new? How's entrepreneurship treating you, my man?
Oh, it's good. Just how do you say? Wish I could sell more things to get more inventory.
Welcome to being a founder.
Yeah. Apart from understanding how little what I had saved up actually is going to get me, doing good. I'm optimistic. I hope Chad is willing to buy some merchandise from various different shows in the near future. Those of you who've been hungering and clamoring and begging me for stuff like shirts and hats and basically any kind of merch you can think of, get your wallet ready. That's all I'll say for now.
And did you get your water main or water service lines and all that stuff squared away?
Yeah, they had already squared that away by the time I started. What they needed to do is rip out all of the drywall in my bathroom and replace it, and that has been finished. So,
Okay.
unfortunately, the graphics that were supposed to be done 2 weeks ago are not. So, we shall see, because I can't submit for distributorship until I have graphics on the building. So, yay!
Well, good. I'm glad. So licenses and all that sort of stuff are all squared away.
Yep. At this point, we're just waiting for my graphics to get
All
done
right.
so we can make signage.
Well, I thought what we would do tonight is sort of go through. I've picked out 8 or 9 different topics. We'll just skim the wave tops on, with an idea that we'll try to provoke some commentary from the viewers via the Gilded chat and participation on the stream. But we can play this any way you want, because again, we're sitting around a campfire or sitting at a bar on a bar stool, sort of talk about this. Here's a question I'm going to start with. It's not the most important one that's on my list, but it is a question that is sort of eating at the back of my brain, and that is, why is the Biden administration so vocal, so active, so worried about Evangerskov, this Wall Street Journal reporter who's been arrested in Russia on charges of being a spy? I mean, you've got the Marine guy who didn't get included in the Brittany Griner trail, who's been there for what, 4 years? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. He's been there 4 years.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and Brittany Griner sort of languished until there was some sort of gay or trans holiday that we wanted to get her out for. But this guy he's been cause celeb. They've called the Russian ambassador to the State Department, and Biden can't think of anything else. And so, I think that's a tell in some way, shape, or form as to what was really going on there. Or they're being pressured by their media folks that this guy is a member of the media, even though he works for Rupert Murdoch. That media folks are supposed to be untouchable. It's reporters sans frontières to a degree, and how dare the Russians, charge this guy with
I think the
espionage.
biggest thing that they need to learn is that as these things keep happening throughout the world, is the First Amendment is an American thing. And freedom of the press is a Western nations thing. You don't go into non-Western nations and start doing sketchy things thinking you're going to be protected by anything.
Hey, Jim, is that how it works in your experience?
The media has become kind of a priesthood of the modern left. So they've lost an archduke,
No, I'm going to I'll take a little issue with you. I think the lawyers are the priesthood of the modern West. I think the media are the acolytes, but they're not the priests. I think they're the guys holding the candles and doing other stuff. But they're on the altar, but they're just not quite priests.
They're holding the scent. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, when all is said and done, there's an unholy alliance between big tech, the mainstream media, and the left.
Yeah.
And any attack on the media, the left always will rush to their defense in any way, shape, or form, with the exception of Fox News and Dominion Gate. They're not going to defend them at all. But, when it comes to the media, they'll bend over backwards for them. Besides, they love portraying the media as victims. That is
heroic, freedom fighting. Yeah, exactly. So what's going to happen when we find out this guy really was generating information for the CIA? Because that's going to come out at some point. If in fact
that's unlawful. It's unlawful to use a reporter as cover. We would never do anything unlawful.
Look, you'll never get the whole story.
I can contradict that without divulging any other sources. I can contradict that in the context of
trust me, I can too. I've
lived and done and seen and not commented on, but I'm just saying that that's
sometimes contractors get sent to pick up packages from people, and it's interesting who you pick them up from.
True.
Well, don't they have a female soccer player or basketball player that we can exchange or something? I don't know. It's like, they focus on all the weird stuff in this administration to be focused on, and it goes back to Brittany Griner or whatever her name is. I don't know. Is women's basketball still being played? I'm not sure, but this is just they focus on all the wrong things, and that's actually one of the hallmarks of the Biden administration.
Yeah, it is. They're tone deaf.
Well, they focus us on all the wrong things. That's kind of a game here. Is we get refocused by nature what the media picks up. So we are constantly not looking at the things that are important. We're constantly being distracted by things that they wish us to look at. It's shiny object syndrome on steroids. And it's something that the population really needs to get around. But sources of information are not as readily available as they should be. I mean, the whole debacle around NPR this week is a good example. And the outrage that Twitter said they're a state mouthpiece. It's like, yeah, well, they take their money from the state. I'm not sure why that's a problem, but they're very worked up about it. And what's interesting is the whole media world is worked up about it.
The rest of the media world is jealous.
Well, they were that way with the Kenobi guy that got killed.
Shogi. Obi-Wan Shogi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi that got killed. They were all upset about that too. And
he had a really nice yacht.
I'm sorry. I'm like, what did this guy think was going to happen? That they were going to just embrace him? It was a joke. But they act like they're literally untouchable, that they're somehow above all of this. And I think it's humorous that the Biden administration thinks they can pick up the phone, call Russia, and get Russia to do anything while we're in the middle of shipping tanks over to Ukraine.
Yeah, because that request was followed by $2.6 billion more to Zelensky, who, by the way, may stop accepting dollars in terms of forms of aid, because it's there's a big movement away from the dollar, which we'll talk a little bit about. But
he's definitely harvesting rubles now. He'll take anything.
I find it remarkable. He actually, if you saw his tweet today, I found it insulting and degrading. But that's just me. So I also, for folks who want to know, or even if you don't want to know, I'm going to tell you, I've taken my marker and I've crossed out the name Mike Pompeo from the presidential hopeful list. Not that he was highly ranked on it, but his comments on Twitter today about it's not about Kiev and Berlin, it's about Des Moines and Wichita in terms of shoveling everything we own into the fire that is Ukraine, was sufficiently disqualifying to take him off the list for me. And I hope those of you within the sound of my voice follow suit, because that's almost John Bolton-esque in its construct. And I just don't think we've got time or place for that. And also, if you're paying attention, the sort of nondescript woman from Taiwan, whose name I cannot remember.
Tsai Ing-wen.
Yeah. Tsai Ing-wen. Met with Kevin McCarthy and a bunch of other congressional leaders today. And the reporting out of that sounds like it rang in my ears as though it was 1941. It was December of 1941 all over again. And there was no limit to American capacity to produce, to be the arsenal of democracy, and that we were going to stand with Taiwan come hell or high water. And I thought, who are these people? Who do they think they're convincing with this narrative?
No idea.
I don't get it. I don't get what they think who they think they're covering for, or why they think they're having to cover for them, or who they think is going to swallow this nonsense, when I know, and so do all my colleagues here, and most of the people in the viewership who watch either CFC or us for any period of time, we don't have the material to do this, guys. not only just the first 15 or
Yeah.
20 minutes, but the intervening 10 to 15 weeks thereafter, we don't have the capacity to do this. And so it's, it's sad to me that we're trying to gin up this, more war sort of scenario. By the way, I just wonder if President Tsai asked Kevin McCarthy as to if we send them checks for aid, whether or not they're good, because we're still subject to the debt ceiling, and nobody seems to have dialed that into the range of parameters that we might want to think about in the context of our global march to World War III. It's I don't know how we're going to afford all the unemployment checks that are going to have to be funded in the second half of this year in terms of what's going on from an employment perspective.
They're saying right now it's going to be 5 years to refill the strategic oil reserve for what's been drained out of it by the Biden administration. And by the way, the cost of that, we're buying that oil, and Stan, you know this better than I do. It's significantly higher costs than what we had paid for it originally.
Yeah. That a lot of that was purchased in the $45 to $55 range at the last trough as it relates to oil prices, and the Biden administration got a little too cute, missed a window, and now they're $20 a barrel below or above
Well,
where they thought.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he promised to refill it at 60 and then didn't when it was at 60.
Yeah, well, he promised. I mean, come on, we're 2 years in. We all know what that's worth.
Right.
So I don't know what to say, except that I think it's going to be really interesting in the midst of a presidential election if oil continues to go up, or even if it just sticks around, $80 for West Texas or 85 for Brent. And by the way, those of you who follow that market, you're probably aware that dual quotation is going to go away. And that's a function of the fact that there's not enough production out of the North Sea to make that price discovery as valid as it has been in the past. So there's a new pricing coming that's a single market price for oil, at least for Western markets, in the next couple of months. And that's going to be interesting to see how that works, because they're very different crudes. They're used for different things, but production in the North Sea is not what production in the North Sea was. And the Norwegians have decided that even though they've been gifted with wonderful resources, that it's against Gaia and the planet to produce them. So they're not investing in any more new production, and they're going to see how quickly they can burn through their sovereign wealth fund, which was basically created by the blessings of oil and natural gas. So anyhow, that's one more example of human beings being sort of short-sighted in the context of how they make their decisions. All right, Neon Arrakis, what are you asking me here? I'm sorry. Could it be they've already agreed under the table to raise the debt ceiling, just letting it go to the last moment to drum up attention when it's needed? No, I don't think so. I think there is a broad-based assumption that says that people will not do the stupid thing or not do the untenable thing and allow it to be a problem. But if you look at the history of the last 36 months in this country, stupid's winning in many respects. And so there's no guarantee that something stupid isn't going to happen here. And I think that there is a core cadre of Republicans, which may or may not include the speaker, that really do want to do something about curtailing spending. And I think the Democrats have decided that if there is a problem, they think they can stand behind all their welfare and assistance programs and blame it on the Republicans and kill the Republicans for a generation. And I'm not sure they're wrong about that, but I do think that there are folks on the Republican side who really want to get some bend to the spending curve. and are willing to take this down to the 11th hour and the 59th minute before they blink. So we'll see what happens. And in that scenario, you can always have a screw up. I mean, there was a screw up the last time we got to this, and the United States was downgraded from AAA to AA. And nobody talks about that, but the cost difference in terms of what we borrow at and what other people borrow at is manifest. All you have to do is look at what Germany borrows at, the cost for a 10-year German bond versus the cost of an American 10-year bond. And there's a good 50 to 75 basis point spread differential between our cost and theirs. And we're not the lower of the two. We're the higher of the two. And you've probably seen that graph that I like to use on Twitter that shows what our debt has done in the way of exploding in the last 30 years. I mean, it was another point of disingenuity, being disingenuous.
We can make it up. It's fine.
That's fine. It's our show, right? The Biden being disingenuous was his saying, it's not my fault. It took 200 years to get this much debt raised. Well, no, it took 30 years. And you can prove that. And of that, you've been president for 2 and vice president for 8. So these guys are really, really good at blaming other people for their screw ups. If you haven't noticed that by now, please pay attention as we go into a presidential election year, because that is their modus operandi.
Right.
So I'm going to open the floor. Anybody else got a topic they want to talk about? I've got a few, but I don't want to monopolize this. It's open discussion Wednesday and open line Wednesday. So what's on the council's mind? That's what I'm interested to know.
Chinese saboteurs. That's what's on our mind.
You read
And not
my
just
mind.
Chinese funded, because a couple folks from Matt's neck of the woods, from Asheville, North Carolina, and Matt, I'm gonna have you tell everyone about Asheville, made their way somehow magically to Connecticut and cut the power to 40,000 people. Matt, you want to run us down that?
Yeah. So anyway, a little backstory with Asheville. Asheville is kind of, I describe it to people like this. It's like Austin, Texas, minus the competent tech people that are there.
Oh, so it's Charlottesville.
It's kind of, Charlottesville. It has a lot of parallels with Charlottesville too. So like, how our favorite drill sergeant, who was making her rounds on the internet yesterday. Female Army Reserve drill sergeant has opinions. Well, she turns out she's from Radford, Virginia, right? So Radford, Virginia, kind of a lefty mountain town kind of deal. Well, Asheville is kind of like that too. Radford is like where all the people who couldn't get into UVA, they kind of like migrate over there. Yep. Asheville's kind of like that too. Like they weren't quite good enough to get into Chapel Hill, even though they don't want to admit it. And they're all like, originally everybody that was going to Asheville for a school, and they got a couple of schools there. Everybody that was going to school there was all like doctors' kids, lawyers' kids that, they had completely disconnected from Main Street life. They have no idea how things work in the real world. And they go up there, they get indoctrinated into some studies program because they're all stupid as shit. And, they're driving around their Land Rovers with acid bears on in the back glass and everything, talking about how they're going to fight for the working class, whatever. They've never worked a day in their life. Their hands are softer than baby shit. But point is that's Asheville in a nutshell. Microsoft has invested a lot of money in that corridor of I-26 going from Asheville to Gastonia, and so that kind of brought in a bunch of shitheads from the left coast too. That you're getting a lot of Californians, Washingtonians, Oregon, so on and so forth. But anyway, how these two meth head lovebirds ended up in Connecticut is, I would venture to guess, because nobody of that category really voluntarily goes to Connecticut unless like they were going up there to hit up grandma for some drug money or something. The mugshot of that girl looked pretty. She looked pretty rough. The guy kind of was your garden variety leftist with a man bun. That girl, I mean, she had the meth sores. She's been in this life for a high minute. So but they're both par for the course for that area. Lot of nastiness, a lot of just really dirty, disheveled people. Left wing ideology. This is kind of the hotbed of Antifa's more, I would say, more mountain oriented folks. The Redneck Revolt, John Brown Gun Club, which they were kind of in competition with one another for a while. I think Redneck Revolt's kind of on its way out, but John Brown Gun Club is very much alive and well. BLM, NC Born. So BLM is kind of a trade name of it. I mean, it exists. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but there's other black nationalist groups that are way more virulent. BLM is just kind of like whatever. But
they're dumb, fat, and happy at this point. I mean, if you raise the amount of money they raised, I mean, what's to be agitated?
Right. NC Born is the big one here. It's North Carolina building our revolution now. They're really the big ones, and you got to know that UNC Asheville is a teachers college. It has a accredited teachers undergrad program there. It, along with Appalachian State, Western Carolina University, and ECU, are the big ones that are known for that here. So, anyway, yeah. So, I mean, likelihood of them being involved in left wing activities high, very very high. Them going up there and attacking a fiber optic cable. I mean, I saw some of the copes online from, quote unquote conservatives saying, "Oh, maybe they were stealing copper. They from a fiber optic
Stealing
cable."
copper from fiber optic. Yeah.
Well, why would you even target that anyway? It doesn't make any sense. There's copper in a lot of other
drive
places
that
that you
far
can go
for
steal.
copper? Yeah.
Yeah, bro. Look, if you're methed out, you think that you're really going to be digging around in the ground for a fiber optic cable? I mean, come on. There's like, look, I've been around a lot of meth heads, man. They take the easy option for everything. They ain't gonna be digging in the ground if they ain't got to. They're just gonna go pull gutters off somebody's house and get their air conditioner. That's what they're gonna do. They were definitely part of it. They were all part and parcel of it. Tying into the bigger point here, calling a spade a spade. I predicted. I think that it was on this show. I think it was. I'm gonna have to look back at my notes, but I think it was on this show that I pointed out that right now Antifa and the militant left will be flying those Ukrainian flags right now, right? But all that's going to change. They're not aligned with Ukraine. They don't give a shit about Ukraine. Ukraine for them is a training conduit. Nothing more, nothing less. They can get that dirt time, that trigger puller time. They're still going to very much take orders from the communist Chinese. They don't care about sides of some conflict in Europe. It's all convenience for them. It's all a show. They're working in concert with the Chinese. They're getting their orders from them, and going real deep into it. Victor Suvrov's Spetsnaz. If you think that the Chinese are not operating that way, you're dead wrong. They go very. Suvorov went very deep into the recruitment process of how they recruit assets, how they were going to do it in the United States. I recall one passage where he talked about environmentalist groups, and he said that their nickname for them in the GRU was watermelons because they were green on the outside but red within. Right. Mm-hmm. So here it is. It's out there. It's in our faces. This is what they're doing, and it's going to get spicier from here. So buy some ammo.
And meanwhile, 2 Chinese nationals were caught running from airport or railroad police from a railroad line, and when they were caught, they had either plasma torches or acetylene torches, something that could go through railroad ties in the same general area where the bomb was found on the pipes in Philadelphia. So when they tell you that all these train derailments happen, they don't happen on that scale. And someone is giving it a helping hand, and they appear to be Chinese.
Well, to add to that, when you say, "Oh, we have over 1,700 or 17,000, whatever their number is," right? I know there was a 7 in it. When you say that, that's passing the blame, right? You're normalizing failure. Okay, but
Matt, this society has spent 30 years doing exactly that on every
yeah.
aspect of human existence.
Right.
We have normalized failure or
Right.
weakness or mental illness.
The bigger point to be made, though, is not that. We know that. But it's the fact that, okay, categorize, because you've given us a quantitative term, give us a qualitative term here. Categorize those train derailments. Because if a car jumps the track and, they just have to pull it back on, however it is they do that, or a train comes uncoupled or whatever, isn't catastrophic, that's a derailment, right? Those kinds of things, yeah, they happen all the time. Do hazmat trains overturn, derail? Do we have 50 car pileups? Do you have to shut down entire towns in Ohio and then blow up the hazmat cars? No, I mean this does not happen every single day or every month or every week, right? This does not happen.
Well, I think we've seen food processing plants go through their stuff. We've seen train derailments go through their stuff. This is a little bit of an escalation in terms of the level of these events. And I guess the question is, what should we be thinking about as the next wave of industrial accidents that take on frequency greater than what they normally do? And what's that portend for what we're doing here?
Well, yeah.
I mean, refineries. Summer driving season.
They're already hitting those.
Yeah.
I would say, from a Carver standpoint, I would say that they're going to hit more substations. The substation attack that we saw at the end of last fall here in North Carolina, that was a probing attack. The ones that followed on with that were a probing attack. These were really a test to see how far it would go. And I predict, if I were the one doing the predictive analysis, and if I were tasked with preventing this, which thankfully I'm not, because I would be I would have a different way of going about it that might be extrajudicial, but they're definitely going to attack the electrical infrastructure, I think, and going into the summer where we're shutting the coal-fired plants down. This is one of the big focuses of the Obama, or I should say, the Biden administration. Was the big focus of the Obama administration. The grid is already going to be strained, and so they know that their allies in the media are going to run cover for them, going to sensationalize that. And on that note, I had a catastrophic hiccup on my end with a internet connection and then my computer trying to reset it. I had to reboot everything, but I jumped in when you guys were talking about NPR. Not to derail things, but I want to throw it out there since my mind is on it. Look up the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Look at where their funding comes from. I posted that up twice today in response to one of their journalists. I don't remember who it was because she's irrelevant. Who cares? She's they're mix and match, right? But the other one was the president of NPR who was upset about being called state media, and I took their numbers of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They get 90% of their funding from us. It's allocated by Congress. So while it's true that NPR
Does
as a
that mean the
company,
fund drives aren't really real?
well, no. NPR and PBS are the two stepchildren of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
No, I know that. I know.
Yeah,
that.
no. I know you know it. I'm just clarifying for the audience. So you give them money so that they have icing on the cake. That's all that is. They're already getting your tax dollars. Okay, this is like Amtrak or the post office. Okay, that's what this is. So I had to point that out since I didn't get to point it out earlier. But with the media sensationalizing things, it goes hand in hand. And when Democracy Now, right, which is a far left wing Marxist. Democracy Now, in fact, I used to listen to Democracy Now just to get an edge on the leftist talking points. I don't so much anymore. But when they get a significant amount of airtime here in North Carolina on public broadcasting here, don't tell me that your programming is fair. Okay, let's just call a spade a spade. Okay, so anyhow, now that I'm on a
Yeah,
tangent.
no, I think we're I think we're no, I think we understand sort of who NPR is, and I'd be, unless you're living in a very rural area and you have no other options. I mean, I suspect that our audience is not the NPR audience to a great degree.
Well,
so
now I will say there are certain aspects of NPR that are very good. Talking about living in rural areas. I mean, Blue Ridge Public Television, they play some great music. They have some great. I mean, if you're into bluegrass and traditional Appalachian music, they play some great stuff. That's about their only value.
I have to say that as a person who's been an NPR reporter and has also gone out and worked for private radio afterwards, kill it with fire, nuke it from orbit. The only way to be sure.
I'm kind of with Watcher. I think I can find bluegrass elsewhere, but
of course.
But all right. So
good and everything.
I have two topics left that I want to discuss before we sort of start into the audience participation round of this, and one of which is Chicago. We gave you a chance. You gave yourself a chance. What the hell? I was amazed to wake up this morning and find out that the teachers union backed, SEIU backed, defund the police, basically Chicago's version of Alvin Bragg, got elected mayor of Chicago by 16,000 votes, which I guess meant that they weren't prepared to pay for a landslide in Chicago this time around. And this really bodes poorly for a city that I used to love. Chicago was everything that was great about New York without being New York, and now it's basically everything. It's a mess. It's a mess. I'm really sad to see the trajectory that the city of Chicago is on. It's not Carl Sandburg's city of big shoulders, hog butcher to the world, that sort of robust, industrial city on the lake any longer. And it's sad. It is. It upsets me to some degree because Chicago could still be a great city, but it's just made it harder on itself. Electing the guy that they did. So, am I looking at this through rose-colored glasses? I mean,
I would point out that guy. I'd point out that guy was behind all day long, and made a miraculous recovery. So I would really like to congratulate him on getting out that vote and finding an awful lot of votes at the end of the day in order to pull that off. So great job. Way to go.
Yeah. It's Well, this isn't the Daily Machine that delivered this. This is the new woke machine in Chicago. I think that is able to deliver this because, again, it's SEIU. It's all the state and federal union workers, the teachers union. That's who pulled this guy across the finish line this time around. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I think too that it's going to be interesting to see how it goes because he said that law enforcement has no place in a modern society. So that's going to be interesting in Chicago.
I don't even know. I don't even know how to respond to that in the context of the murder rates and other aspects of what goes on in South Chicago. I mean, there's a reason why. Never mind. I won't go there. But it's sad. It's sad.
It
Yeah,
is.
PD makes an important point in the chat that Chicago has more pension debt than 44 states. And I did see a retired Chicago policeman interviewed on the streets of Chicago in this morning, and his first comment was, "Well, I hope they can continue to pay our pensions." So I think when you get a bunch of retired cops and firefighters who aren't getting paid their pensions, that things may change in the city of Chicago. So,
Well, they have. I think I'll have to go back and check, but they had the Chicago Police Union spokesman saying that they expect a significant number of resignations very
yeah,
soon. Very
there
soon.
were a lot of people who were holding out when who had decided to wait and see what happened with this election.
I think that
Um,
it was something to the tune of between 1,000 and 4,000 officers, which basically is have fun.
Yeah.
Have fun with that one. You know, how to kill a city overnight. You know, and what's going to end up happening with Chicago? I mean, we've seen this story play out in other cities already. Jackson, Mississippi is a perfect example of this. Jackson was always kind of an interesting place, but they elected a openly socialist mayor who ran on liberation theology ticket, literally, you know, sounding like an African dictator, and that's literally, you know, radical redistribution of wealth, and you know, basically took all his talking points from the worst of the Obama administration. And what did he do when the water pump? You've got a city that has a river running through it. And what did he do when the city's water pump failed? The system failed. He said that he was going to need $1 billion from the federal government and that it was the state of Mississippi's fault. Right. So what did the state of Mississippi do? They got the Army of Corps of Engineers come in. All they had to do was reset the pump. What happened to this mayor? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And if you drive through Jackson, Mississippi, it's a place you don't want to stop. All right. It's not a nice place to be. It's not a nice place to stay. It is a very, very dangerous place. It ranks among one of the highest in crime rate in the entire Southeast. And why is that? Because this is what you get when you have direct democracy. This is what you get. All right. Chicago, this is what you get. Chicago was bad enough. They're about to get the Jackson, Mississippi treatment. It's going to be unlivable. The situation is going to be untenable. And, you know, hey, I'm not mourning for it, honestly.
I am. I used to really care for Chicago a great deal. I had a great deal of fun there, made a great deal of money there. Like I said, it used to be it was New York without the stuff that makes New York untenable. It's no longer that way. It's now Baltimore on Lake Michigan, and rapidly getting worse. And so I'm sorry to hear that. But and the last thing I want to touch on before we open up and some of you have asked about this, is that if you're keeping score at home, the U.S. dollar is on a losing streak. I think they're 0-15 in the last 15 games played. And so this phenomena that we talk about, quite honestly, we have talked about for a year, about de-dollarization of international trade and the reserve currency, has really, really picked up the pace, even to the point that the BRICS summit this summer, which sounds like a long way off, but isn't, they're going to have the first real tangible working meetings on a combined currency. Think of it as the euro, issued by people who actually make stuff and produce stuff. By that I mean hard assets. And I hear economists come on and talk about, gee, that can't happen. It won't happen. The dollar is beloved by many because, it is the currency that reflects our rule of law society. I'm looking around for the rule of law thing in recent weeks, and it's getting harder to find in the construct of this society. The rule of law really seems to have been taking it as well, in many instances. And, we can talk a little bit about Trump if you want, but I'm going to wait for others to bring that up. But the decline of the dollar is gathering pace, and frankly, it's happening at speeds that I didn't think it was going to happen at. And Jim, I'm sort of interested to get your views on this phenomenon and what the implications of this are.
It's Biden's fault. Sorry.
I'm sorry,
Really?
You can't say that. Yeah, you can't say that. That's
No, the unwinding of the
it really
dollar
is.
The unwinding of the dollar is kind of predictable. I mean, we've indentured ourselves. We've got massive debt. We've mismanaged our power. So the issue then becomes: are we actually going to defend ourselves? No, clearly. We're going to refuse to identify weakness because there's an election in 20 months. So more damage will be done to the dollar, and more people will see reason to leave us as a reserve currency and as a partner. And we're just failing on a policy standpoint. I mean, I hate to be the downer tonight. I seem to be on that pattern, but we can't get out of our own way on setting policy, and our legalistic demands and structure and our rule setting capacity isn't backed up by throw weight anymore. And that's a double-edged sword, because we used to be able to buy our way out of trouble. And now we can't buy our way out of trouble. We can't influence our way out of trouble. We go into a direct conflict mode, and that's unpleasant from the standpoint of global outcomes. So with the Chinese getting very disappointed in us and executing brilliantly, I might add, and I'm not Han, but I'm not a fan. I'm quite staggered that our team really has no response to the speed with which China has gone and filled the vacuum. And I started talking about this vacuum, 10, 15 years ago in a number of discussions with people. And they said, well, what vacuum are you talking about? And I said, well, the U.S. is losing influence because we don't listen well. We're so focused on the mission of the GWAT, we're just not listening at all. And here it is, it's caught up with us. And even though there are a lot of smart people like Joe and Matt in the intelligentsia of our country, and that's not a pejorative, guys. People aren't listening to the people who understand what conflict really, really looks like. We're listening to a bunch of guys who went to Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, and they're saying, we can legalize our way out of this. We can structure our way out of this. It's like Team America. It's like Hans Blix coming in and saying, hey, you're not reading my letters. uh, we're kind of past the point of reading letters. We're past the point of engaging in discussions about legal structure. It isn't about negotiations. This is down to brute force, elbows and arms, and commercial sustainability. So feeding your people, keeping commerce alive. So we're in a defensive move on the dollar. And I don't think anybody at the Treasury has been trained on defensive behavior. All they know is offensive, which is we're just not going to let you play anymore. And we're going to send you a letter and we're going to say you can't play anymore. So OFAC will bop a letter off to someone and say, okay, you're a bad guy now. You're forbidden from dealing in the dollar regimen. They're now saying, fine, we'll just go to Dubai and we'll move money without you.
Yeah, we've actually been the accelerant in our behavior has been the accelerant in this move against the dollar, and it's there's been an abject lesson to most of the non-aligned world that says if you piss us off, here's what happens, and they want to mitigate that risk by having something else with which to trade, and so we've really got ourselves to blame to a great degree. I have an observation as we segue into the viewer participation portion of this, in that, I was a real history buff as a kid, and I've got an 11-year-old son who's also inclined in that direction. And I was really interested in the Roman Empire, and I read Gibbons and I read everything I could get my hands on about the Roman Empire, and that persisted. And as a kid, I always thought, well, they had to know, that the Roman Empire was declining, and it split up into two, and it was still declining. And why didn't anybody do anything to stop that? Here's the most advanced society on the face of the earth at that particular point. And I feel like I'm living in the decline of the Roman Empire. And I can look around and I can say, I know what the problem is. Why isn't anybody doing anything about it? Except that it's not going to take 400 years this time around, because the pace of things in this world has accelerated dramatically. It's not going to take 400 years for this to run its course. And the Visigoths are coming over the southern border in this instance, not the northern border, although increasingly now over the northern border. And I just wonder, and you've heard me say a little bit about this. You're going to hear me say a lot more about it in coming weeks. And that is, I just wonder, what is the inflection point when those of us with the means finally stand up and say, we're not taking this shit anymore. There was a great tweet, and I'm going to butcher the name, but there's an account I'd ask you to follow, but it's the Taliban's public relations. It's a troll account. Just don't throw stuff at me. But this guy is really, huh? You're frozen.
It's classic. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and there was a very.
Well, I can't help that.
Today. There was a very good tweet today about the Second Amendment, and they said, you guys like to whine about the Second Amendment. You got all the guns. What are you doing? And so I think we're at that point where you have to look around and look at people that have got the capability and the inclination to start doing what needs to be done to not put up with this anymore. I just wonder what's going to be the event. I don't think it's Trump's legal troubles. I have said for 2 years, I think it's going to be the 2024 election and the aftermath of that. We'll see if that still holds. But I think I think it's going to take one more stolen election for us to sort of wake up as a nation and say, hey, wait a minute, you don't get to do that to us. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope it happens early, and I hope it happens without the necessary broken cutlery in China. But I don't think I am wrong in that regard.
Can I interject real quick before we?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
No, my take on this, Stan, is you're very correct. The key challenge here is people are not speaking openly. And when somebody comes up to you and gives you a string of total crazy, right? Somebody comes up to you and looks you in the eye and starts talking in tongues and says, you don't understand, it's all your fault. And so is insane. look them in the eye and smile at them and say, geez, I sense your angst here. I completely and utterly disagree with you, and that's just okay. Because we've been too quiet for too long. We've tolerated behaviors that are intolerable, and we've put at risk our whole society, right? And this is the arc of our society from Tiberias all the way to Seattle, right? It's a big piece of history and culture. And if we're willing to do that for this new thing, so be it. I personally am not. When people come up to me and spout nonsense, I used to be quite deferential. And Stan will tell you, I can sit in a room with people who are Marxist Communist Party members because I've done it my whole life and listen to what they say. You don't have to agree with them. You got to listen to what they say because they're in the room with you trying to state something or make something happen. You don't have to buy in on it. And as a society, we failed to politely say, I totally disagree with you. And I am a participant. I am a citizen. I am here. You can't ignore me. And it isn't violence and it isn't abuse. And for some reason, we've lost the art of just saying, golly, I totally disagree with you. And these are the reasons why.
See, but I don't think, I think we're over the event horizon with respect to that it's sufficient just to vocally say, I disagree with you. I think there was a time and place for that. I think it's still a viable and effective thing to do. You should live your values in many, many ways. You should not sit quietly when people are basically spouting bullshit and calling it something else. But I think we've been cowed either through normalcy bias or sensitivity training or not wanting to rock the boat, thinking that it's all we're just one election away from turning this around. And I think that's false. We've been cowed into not taking action. I mean, as I look back at the last 30 months of this country, the biggest thing that people that think like I think, and like many of you think, the biggest thing we did in that period of time is we went to school board meetings. That's great, but I got to tell you something, boys and girls, that ain't enough. I mean, I understand that. And, there was a rumor going around that there were people trying to get some of the kids in our school district to walk out today in support of gun control. And trust me, I was all over that. And turns out it was just a rumor. I talked to my son about that and one thing and another. But as laudable as it is, and maybe it took the threat to kids to wake people up in a more affirmative way, but it doesn't end with the school board. And I just think that we need to be more proactive, less passive, more constructive in terms of how we try to achieve, and I'll call it this, the restoration of a normal society in the face of all of the stupid stuff that we're seeing all day, every day in this society. We joked about the Jack Daniels thing. We joked about the Bud Light thing. I'm no fan of Bud Light, and I wouldn't drink a whiskey that's treated to taste like apples, but it pisses me off to a great degree to see these cultural brands, and Anheuser-Busch was a brand, okay, before the Brazilians took control of it. Jack Daniels was a brand, and Brown-Forman is still a brand. I mean, that whiskey company is still a brand. And I hate to see these people kneeling in the dirt in front of these mentally ill motherfuckers that are trying to tell us that their illness is normal. And I could get wound up here, but I'm not going to do that because I want to get other people's views on this. But I just think that I think that we as God-fearing Christian men and women, and I don't even limit it to that. I mean, because there are Muslim people I know who are just as offended by this stuff, who want to live their lives in ways that are constructive and consistent with conservative values. And so those people of the book, let me put it that way, if you're a student of that, those people of the book who want to live their lives in a godly fashion need to stand up and just say, we're done. We're not doing this anymore.
So it's funny to put it in a non-American context. Nayib Bukele, guy that runs El Salvador, came out. He came out today. He's got a great quote. He said the United States' ability to pressure other countries to improve their own democracy is gone. All right. This is the guy who runs El Salvador.
Wait a minute. Wait. No, and I need to put this into context so that if you don't know who this guy is, he's the guy who has finally begun to crack down on MS-13 in his country. Okay, he's the guy who has built a supermax prison in a country that doesn't have the money to build a supermax prison that will hold 20,000 people. And you guys can keep me honest on this. He put 4,000 of them in there already, and just said these people are gone for a generation while we attack the root causes of gang violence, which is cartel violence in that country. And his people have taken to this because it impacts their quality of life. It impacts the safety of their life. And if you can do it in El Salvador, what's to say you can't do it in Mexico? What's to say you can't do it in Chicago, Illinois, for that matter? And
it's also a country. It's also a country that is incredibly tied to our country. I mean, the diaspora of Salvadorans here is massive.
Look, I remember in the 90s traveling to El Salvador in the context of investments that we made in the mobile telephony system down there. And you couldn't go anywhere at that time. You couldn't go anywhere without security up the wazoo, guys like Joe Dolio and Matt had to be in, Jeeps in front and behind you in that situation. And it's gotten worse. And they finally have said, we're not going to do this anymore. And I'm just wondering, what is it going to take for Americans to say, we're not going to do this anymore? We're not going to let Chicago become the next Harare. We're not going to let Baltimore slide off into the bay. We're not going to let these places go. And I don't care if you're offended, because you're foisting your mental illnesses on me as though they were normal is what is offensive. It's not my disbelief that it's on par with the values of people who live their lives in a constructive manner. So you want to go be whatever you want to go someplace else. Sorry.
I said we're going to need to be running those kind of convoys into the cities, Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, before too long. And we're not that far off.
I might want to point out that Bukele does wear a beard. So things have changed since the 90s. Nobody wore a beard in the 90s.
Well, okay. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that. Watcher, do we have anybody that wants to talk to us that we can?
Yeah, we got a couple people on the line. I got our first caller right here, actually. Welcome, Major.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Major.
Good evening.
Well, I just wanted to talk about something that Stan had just mentioned. I saw a couple of days ago the new Bud brand manager that they named sometime last year. I don't know if her name was Karen, but her middle name was Karen, and she fits the bill. 30 years old. I'm sure she went to Yale, Princeton, one of those fancy Chicago schools. And these people have no idea. They get these jobs, and they have no idea the brand. They foist their thoughts or political opinions onto this, and apparently there's nobody in the corporation there to stop them. And that kind of leads to my other comment would be, Stan, you seem like you're a wise old money man back from the 80s and 90s and well-traveled. My question is I'm not worried about the Democrats, and everybody calls, the Democrats, they're commies. I don't think they're commies. They're something else. They, I don't think any commie would have like 5 homes in a vineyard if they were truly communist. But can capitalism survive the capitalist?
I'll come back to that in a minute.
I'm just saying. I know what you're going to get to, but can capitalism survive the capitalist? Because when you take a look at like Jamie Dimon's comments today about taking land, to do solar panels, like this, Jamie Dimon, like he should know better. Like look at where his position is in terms of the financial world,
right?
And you have him saying dumbass stuff like that. As somebody, I'm sure the business, when I don't know how active you're in the business right now, I still think you dabble. But was it as bad as it is now in terms of corporations, the banking industry, when you started in the industry?
All right, so let me try to unpack that. And thanks, Major. What part of Massachusetts are you living in? Just out of curiosity.
I am. I'm 20 minutes from the Columbia, South Carolina PSA retail store. So I go there every other day, lusting after what AK I want to get. I escaped there about 4 years ago.
You escaped. Okay, so where did you emigrate from?
Good.
I'm trying to place the accent. That's
all. I'm from Massachusetts. I a little coastal town south of Boston.
I'm not. Yeah, that's the Southie. That's what I was going for. It's
Both parents are from.
I hear
Southie.
Remnants of that still.
Yeah,
Marshfield.
Okay. Yeah, right. You got it.
Excellent.
That's a great call.
I'm not gonna try to take your comment about they're not Marxists. And then try to address the situation with Jamie Dimon. We will take the and rise of state capitalism.
Hey Stan, I think we're getting some network interruption on your
watch end. How that has, yeah. On my end,
you're getting staticky. We're not getting you. Yeah.
Yeah. Repeat yourself, Stan.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what.
It's cleared up now. Go ahead and just repeat from top.
Okay, I don't want to monopolize this because I think other people have valuable contributions they can make to this. But I think what we're seeing is the emergence of state capitalism in the United States. So it used to be there was a regulatory relationship, but there was a separation between the functioning of the government, and this is how it was intended, and the functioning of businesses. In the regulatory state, though, the symbiosis between corporate leaders and government leaders has grown closer and closer and closer to the point where the former is not willing to offend the latter because they suffer regulatory consequences if they do. The end game for this is what goes on in China, and I'm going to ask my friend Jim to talk a little bit about the functioning of state capitalism, because that's the roadmap we're on, is that state-owned enterprises or state-controlled enterprises. And having lived in the Boston area, you're familiar with the sort of biotech industry and a lot of the venture work that goes on in Boston. You're going to start to see the government pick more winners and losers at an earlier stage, and a lot of this has been driven by what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. But Jim, you want to talk a little bit about state capitalism as it's practiced in China and how it's practiced here? I think to try to, and then I'll come back and compare and contrast my journey through finance in the 80s and 90s and where I think we are now.
Yeah, we've got an interesting challenge going ahead here, because governments get really irritated with their inability to do things. And so they begin to set by decree that they're going to take control of certain rules and regulations and start choosing winners. And about 6 months ago, this group of guys, we kind of have sidebars, and we had a discussion about where this was headed. And I said, I think we're going to state capitalism. And then watching what was going on in the back rooms with the decrees coming out of DC and the amount of money they're giving to these various government controlled capital groups. When SVB went down, the option was either go full state capitalism, which is they're gonna be the only sole offers for capital available to innovation, or they'd have to save SVB and then become the only people who can help capital scale. And I think we're at the point where they've kind of saved SVB, but I think it's going to be finger painting. What they really want to do is if you need scalable capital, that B round, C round of venture capital to grow a company, begin to hire people and really commercially deliver solutions. You're going to have government saying, you're on our list, we like you. So it'll be DARPA, it'll be Intel, it'll be Department of Energy and all of the other government entities that have the hooks into this giant bolus of capital, this $1 trillion that they allocated. I sadly think they're going to be the people who choose who wins. And I think they're going to miss out on generations of innovation. And, coming from Massachusetts, you know how much innovation came out of Boston. And it's because they pulled in the smartest kids from around the world and they dump them into Cambridge and a few other towns. And by God, there are winners that come out of that. And so MIT and those kids are just freaking brilliant. But we're going to crush that if we allow state capitalism to take over. And Marshfield's
the other end of that spectrum,
good place to grow up.
The other place of that spectrum, major, is that's at the startup end. The other end, Jim, I don't know who you're wrestling with there, Mike, but so the other end of that spectrum is what's in the poorly named Inflation Reduction Act. And you're starting to see that feed through into the media. Okay, so the Inflation Reduction Act has got hundreds of millions, trillions of dollars of money that is targeted to co-opt corporate behavior, most of it in environmental ways, to pick winners and losers, to reward the winners, to reward the politically reliable. And so companies, not just in the United States, but I saw Nissan today was talking about how they welcome the electrification of their vehicle fleet, and they think that the Inflation Reduction Act is a wonderful thing because they can generate tax credits and one thing and another. And so we're letting our government, whose views half the country does virulently disagree with, take our tax dollars and then some, the dollars that we borrow or print, and lay this out in a primrose path to capture the leadership of what are supposed to be capitalistic organizations that are working for the benefit of the shareholders. And you may have noticed a few years ago, major corporations were taught to really focus on the needs not just of shareholders, but stakeholders. And stakeholders became this magic word, that stakeholders were people who used the product. Stakeholders were people who shared the ideals of the company. Stakeholders were people that were the workers to a much greater degree than in prior iterations. Stakeholders could be anybody who might even be offended by a brand. When's the last time you saw, the Frito Bandito? Okay, you may be of an age that you grew up with the Frito Bandito. I know I did.
That dude is gone. Yeah.
I thought the Frito Band. I thought Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima. Okay, so stakeholders. These people were stakeholders because they had the basis of being offended by characteristics of brands, and which makes no sense. You have the ability to go buy a different product that does the same thing. If you don't like it, you can vote with your feet. You don't have to get the government to come in and strong arm companies through regulatory excess to do things that these minorities that the government, that elements of our government want to promote in order to drive what? Conformity, compliance, complicitous. Anyhow, being complicit with whatever the agenda is. And the agenda is don't argue, don't fight, just shut up and take it. in
The
many
only
ways.
sorry, the only
Go ahead.
brand right now that I know that's getting any pushback is well, the ones getting the major pushback is Disney, and they seem to be shooting themselves in the foot every other way, but they just keep put their head down and they keep marching forward. So I don't know where it's going to go. Can I leave you with one other thing?
Well,
The-
let me before you go before yes you can. But before you do that, let me comment on that Disney thing because I think Disney is insidious. Um, and I think they've covered up the faux pas of the prior CEO who was saying all the woke stuff out loud and who really jeopardized attendance at the parks. And they took him out behind the barn. They shot him. They brought back Bob Iger. But Disney is still going to normalize what they think is the current agenda. Bob Iger is just a more deft hand at doing it. And if you don't believe that, then these meetings that are going on out in Simi Valley at the Reagan Library, today was the Taiwanese president. The day before was tech leaders, and the day after tomorrow is going to be more tech leaders. And Disney's not a tech company, but Bob Iger is going to be there. And Bob Iger is going to be meeting with members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, to talk about why Disney wants to continue to do what Disney has been doing in the normalization of the abnormal in the context of human behavior. And so they haven't changed a thing at Disney other than they've changed the branding. They've changed the wrapper on what is the message at Disney. And Disney's banned in our household. I won't have it. I won't watch ESPN any longer because I just don't want to support Disney.
haven't watched them in years.
And so I make an exception once in a while for UFC, but that's about it. And so I they've gotten much more sophisticated in covering up again what they're going to be doing. And so you're going to have to be an intelligent consumer here, particularly as it relates to Disney and other aspects of this. So I don't think that there's anybody pushing back on this narrative to too great a degree. And that includes all the people who just blithely go out and continue to buy stuff at Disney or sign their kids up to watch Disney Plus because they think The Mandalorian is really something that's a great half-hour babysitter for them. It's ridiculous. The Disney of my youth, and I suspect the Disney of your youth, doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for 20 some odd years. The things that made Disney what Disney was are rotting away in a warehouse someplace.
So Major, yeah,
I'm pretty sure last night they shot Mandalorian in the foot, by the way. So whatever.
So the Major had a question.
So my last thing is April 1st, the extended Medicaid benefits started to expire and people are going to be losing Medicaid. And I know as conservatives, we all have to be like, people have to lift them up by their own bootstraps and be independent. And that's great. And I agree with that. But I have a problem with that when we've already give Ukraine $100 billion. We gave them another $2.6 billion. And I'm sure by July 1st, we'll give them another $25-40 billion.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all.
So, the people up in Washington, they're representing somebody. It's not none of us, but it's got to be somebody. So I just leave you with that. And I thank you for your time.
They haven't figured out a way to take 10% of what goes into Medicare yet.
For the big guy.
It's not just the big guy. It's the graft industry in the district is such that it's paid for a lot of McMansions in and around the Beltway, and they have to feed the machine.
Oh yeah, trust me. I worked where I worked right down the street. There was a Raytheon building, and every Christmas they'd have a Patriot missile battery out there with lights on it. I used to joke the only thing it could shoot down was our own jets, but that's probably a subject for another matter.
Probably is. Well, the one aircraft that's safe from being shot down by Patriot missile batteries is the F-35 because we can't
fly.
Yeah, we
can't get that bad boy off the ground.
They're too busy pulling parts from other ones that work to put them in because
All right, Major. I'm sorry to shuffle you off. We've got a bunch of other people back in the queue.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Hey,
your questions.
thank you, and
Thanks.
I hope you feel good about your move to South Carolina. I hope that's worked out the way you want it to, and
Definitely.
if you're a fan of PSA, you're welcome here at any time.
Yeah, anytime you come down here, you want to go, I'll meet you there, and I'll show you the good AKs.
All right, we'll do that.
Oh, I know where the good AKs are.
Thank you, Major. Appreciate it, my man. What's up next, Walter?
I think up next is Mr. Mergoot. Welcome, Mergoot.
Good evening,
Hey.
gentlemen.
Good evening. How are you?
Pretty good. This will probably go to you, Stan. On to foreign policy. Where do the three main factions of the Kurds, the Iranians, the Iraqis, and the PKK, stand on the Armenian Azerbaijani?
I don't think they're terribly involved. I think they've got a lot to say grace over at this particular point. What unites the Kurds is their antithesis to Turkey to a great degree, and to some degree to Iran. But it doesn't really resonate from their perspective at this particular point. They're not pro-Azeri. They're not necessarily pro-Armenian. Armenians are not. They're pro-Kurd, and the situation between there's a slightly less animus between Armenians and Kurds than there is between Armenians and Turks, because the Kurds were sort of the collaborators in the context of the genocide back in the day. But I don't think that the Kurds really want to get pulled into that. They got enough problems in the context of trying to create Kurdistan, and on that matter, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because the Iraqi government did reach an agreement with the self-governing Kurds in Erbil. That's going to allow them to move about 500,000 barrels a day through a pipeline that had been closed through Turkey to Ceyhan, and ship it out internationally. So that actually undoes some of the production cuts that you saw from OPEC Plus the other day. If, as and when that it's meant to be temporary, but in these matters, people get used to the cash flow. And once the cash flow starts, temporary turns into longer term than that. So we'll see what happens in that regard. And frankly, it'd be great, because if our 900 troops in Syria don't have to continue to operate those wells to support Kurdish resistance, then maybe we can bring our guys home, and the Kurds can look after themselves. That would be my hope. What else? Anything else?
I believe that's it. You've answered most of my questions for tonight. So
very good. Thanks for joining in, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good evening, guys.
Thanks, buddy. We'll see you. Yeah.
Watcher, anything else?
Well, yeah, we've got a couple more. I had number 3 stacked to come in, but he hasn't joined, so I'm just gonna go ahead and send it to number 4, and hopefully we'll get him in here.
All right.
Probably
some show is rating our chat, and we're glad. The expert.
Oh, hey, let me check that out. Sorry about that.
Welcome the expert.
Oh, actually, real quick, we've got a bunch of Rumble rants we need to go over. So let me get those on screen right now. So first of all, $5 from Seymour SR says, "What do you guys think of Robert F. Kennedy's announcement that he's running for president?"
I'm thrilled by that. I really am. I'm thrilled by that for 2 reasons. One, I think he helps keep alive the fact that so much about the pandemic was. Do we have a mod who can sort of do something about the expert, or what are we doing with that?
They're doing
well, that's they're rating our channel, which is kind of it's a love-in thing. It's essentially where somebody ended their show, and instead of just clicking off, they said, "Hey, everybody who's here, go over there and let them know that we're here supporting them."
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm sorry to mischaracterize that. I thought. Never mind. I won't.
We greatly appreciate it.
Hey, okay. We appreciate you.
Yeah, we appreciate you. So I think that it's great that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is going to run. I think he's a dissident voice in the Democratic Party. I don't know how many people he's going to reach with his message, given the constituency that is the Democrats at this particular point. But I think it's great that he's going to run, and now I know where Tulsi Gabbard can get a seat in that process without disrupting the Republican primaries going forward. But I look, I mean, I think that's what it takes. I think it takes people like Bobby Kennedy Jr. who've got a point of view and they want to express it, and he's willing to parlay his name into as much as he possibly can, and hopefully he's going to have something to contribute to the race.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about, Stan. Finally, people are willing to say, hey, I actually do disagree with you, and they're willing to take action on the disagreement, right? And I think Robert Kennedy's in an interesting position to do that. You may not totally agree with him, but having somebody come up in the democratic process and say, I don't agree with you, and not only don't I agree with you, but I'm willing to get up on the soapbox and have this out in the public square under our democratic republic. We just don't have enough of that, and we don't have enough people who are willing and able to sustain that kind of battle, because a 24-month battle on a national stage is expensive, painful, and can really be damaging. So more power to him.
Yeah, if you haven't read his book about Fauci, I recommend it. He does a very good job, and it's been out now for about a year. So he does a very good job of sort of taking apart the myth of Anthony Fauci, and that in its own right is a service to the Republic.
And then we've got another 25 here from Kit Kats, who just gives $25 to say, "Love the Privy Council show. Have a blessed Easter to all who celebrate." Thank you so much.
Hey, let me
Kit Kats.
comment on that. For my Michigan people, we decided to go to Frankenmuth on Easter Sunday. So if any of you are going to be around that area, let me know.
What did I step in that rumble chat? Go back there for a minute. Somebody was saying, "Oh no, Stan." What?
Oh,
curious.
I didn't read that. Let me. No Disney here. Oh yeah, I have no idea where that's from.
and to respond, I think to somebody else, like Grizzly or somebody in the chat. Yes, I'm a boomer. I don't make any bones about that. I'm.
It was probably when you were having staticky roboting issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we do have we've got our next viewer lined up and in the can. Welcome, Peter.
Let's go.
Hey, Peter.
Hey guys, decided to use my computer instead of being ghetto with my phone.
Hey man.
So I'm gonna steal this from Rakeda because he brought up a good point, I think, today. So generally these trials and everything drag out between 12 to 18 months. That's going to run obviously right smack into the election. So it's kind of two questions in one. I assume that the New York City has the same type of jury pool that the DC jury pool would be, meaning completely tainted and would politically convict Trump, no questions asked, even if, there's nothing to it, right? So the question is, if Trump is convicted before he's elected, or what happens if Trump is convicted before the election, and what happens if he's convicted after the election? How does that play out in the United States? Because
let me give a couple of things. First of all, this is never going to see a jury. This is going to get resolved long before it ever gets to a jury, because he hasn't even alleged a crime yet, and he's violating the Sixth Amendment there by not even alleging a crime. If he is convicted by some odd chance before the election, nothing happens. It's not a federal crime, and it's not one of the specific ones that bars him from holding office. You'd be shocked at the number of convicted felons who are holding federal office right now. So the answer is nothing. It's all just a show. But I honestly don't believe they want it resolved before the election. They know they can't win this, so they're going to play every legal game in the book to keep it active, open, and pending until after the election, when they will quietly drop it or resolve it. So that's a good question, though.
Yeah, Peter, I'm not so sure I agree with Joe in this regard. I think they're going to drag this out. I think they've selected a judge who's not going to dismiss this. I think that in most other venues, given the lack of specificity of the charge, the lack of, as Joe says correctly, that the elevation of this from a misdemeanor to a felony is predicated upon identifying a second crime that was the reason why the 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 alleged forgery of corporate documents happened to begin with in order to cover up that not mentioned second crime. And I've seen a lot of people who are legal scholars. I'm not, but I've seen a lot of people who are legal scholars who said that on its own basically would probably be cause for dismissal if you had a real judge in this instance.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned that this guy has been handpicked just to sort of, go along with this and let this play out. And so we know the next date is the bill of particulars is September, I think, is when they're talking about having the bill of particulars, at which point they are supposed to have named this mythical second crime that applies to all 34 counts in the indictment. I don't think we're going to get that because I don't think they know what they're going to try to do. I think they're trying to drag this out as long as possible. But if it does get to a jury, I'll give you Alan Dershowitz's opinion, and he's much more of a legal scholar than I am. He thinks that if it goes to trial, Trump gets convicted. He'll win on appeal, but he'll go through the process of being convicted.
Yup, and then they'll slap the cuffs on him, and he'll be sitting in a cell.
Is never going to allow that.
Yeah. I hope
this
Joe's right.
Should have never been allowed, but I honestly think that we're now in Banana Republic territory, and all the rules are out the window. So we're gonna solve it behind closed doors things. Yes, professionally, that's how it's supposed to be, but I mean, I'm looking more at third world country BS. This isn't like first world nation, rules anymore.
Well, but it's not new. It's been going on. I make the point continuously that there are people with far less clout and the lack of Secret Service protection who've languished in DC jails since the 6th of January.
With zero chargeable days applied.
Zero chargeable days. Zero chargeable days, held in solitary, unable to contact their attorney. I mean, it's just short of the greatest legal travesty in the history of the nation, which was Abraham Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War. And so we're into that territory. You're right. I mean, there is no longer, we're not a nation of laws any longer. And that's going to continue to reflect itself as the society continues to degrade. And so the certainty of outcome that we've relied on, the certainty of property rights. Look at this comment that Jamie Dimon made. Okay, if I own property that the government wants to put solar panels on, he's advocating that they take it by eminent domain. That's ridiculous. I mean, this is how far people are rolling in their graves who thought they would never, ever see this country invalidate the key things that it's built on: property rights, rule of law, freedom of speech. All three.
Matt tweeted about this earlier today. Boys and girls, we're way beyond the Rubicon.
Yeah. So
sorry, to pin down the question.
Yep.
I mean, Trump, worst case scenario, even if he does win an appeal, Trump gets handcuffed. I mean, is it going to be 2020 over again? Maybe some protesting and then shrugs and go home? Or does anybody actually do anything about anything? At any,
I don't see Trump getting any sort of jail time, even if he's convicted.
Or no, and we're just doomed to watch.
You're breaking up on us a little bit, Peter. Can you repeat that, please? Peter?
Sorry about that. We here kind of know the history of how this plays out, more or less. Are we all just doomed to watch it happen anyway? Does anybody do anything at any level, or does this all just keep sliding to tyranny and everybody just shrugs their shoulders? And
well, I'm going to
So,
ask you.
all
I'm
right,
going to ask.
it is what it
Wait a
is.
minute. Matt, 1 second. I'm going to ask you to look in the mirror and answer that question. I mean, so, and I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just going to make this point more bold.
I would
Stan,
prefer
Mayor.
not to get too specific, but
No,
I am doing
I'm
things on the local level in my area.
okay.
Stan, may I?
Yeah.
Gideon said to God, "How did you let this
Networking.
happen?" Gideon said, God said to Gideon, "You've been here the whole time."
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I think
Go ahead, Watcher.
Yep, no, I agree, but I control what I can control on my level, and I'm doing the utmost to do that. But I am also not, say, like a a prosecutor in a red state who could start doing the same stuff that Bragg's doing by charging Biden with, actual crimes. Like, I don't think anything substantial is going to happen. So I can prepare, myself, my family, my community, but I don't think it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen on the state or national level.
Well, look, if I may, James Lindsay offered what I feel is probably the direct answer to what you're talking about here. In a tweet thread this morning, I don't remember who he was responding to, but essentially the question was, why can't Republicans pull their heads out of their asses? And half the problem is that most of the leadership doesn't realize what the problem is. They're entirely disconnected. But the other half of this problem, and the bigger half of this problem, is that the entire Republican base is trying to elect a messiah. They continue to lose on the local level because they refuse to engage on the local level. Not you individually. I'm talking about the base in general. They're trying to elect a messiah, and they're going to continuously keep getting their shit kicked in until either they're eradicated or they elect a Caesar.
Fair. So it has to
I
get a
think
lot
that's a pretty
worse
good
before there's a hope of getting better. All right. Thanks, guys.
right on. Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you,
with
Peter.
it, Peter.
Well, I'd offer a slightly different viewpoint on that. One which I've held for, as Jim can tell you, one which I've held for 5 years, I guess at this point, and that is, I don't think it does get better.
It doesn't. And here's the thing: is everyone says, "I want someone to do something," but who's going to do it?
Well, I think what's going to happen is, I think that this election is going to be the one that demonstrates the futility of elections as they're currently constructed.
Yeah.
With the continuation of mass mail-in voting and early voting and all of these innovations that have crept into voting in the last 10 years or so. I don't think that we have the capacity to vote our way out of this. And I think that that's going to settle in on people at the next inauguration in 2025, when I think, President Newsom takes office, having won a plurality but not a majority of the vote. And so I think that's going to be the wake up call to normal people. And I think you're going to start to see movements into creating their own polity in their local areas, separate and distinct from federal oversight. And that's going to likely precipitate a real backlash by the federal government. And I think it's going to get kinetic in the context of that sort of time frame.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to tell you that, but I keep running the analysis. I keep running the likelihood, the probabilities of this, and they're never going to let us go live on our own. And so
Never.
I think that's good. I think that's going to bring us to a tipping point where either the thugs that work for them, Antifa comes to mind, or the U.S. military, which is being transformed as we watch. I think that they're finally going to get their reaction that they've been fishing for 2 years, in the context of one more stolen presidential election. And I think that's going to be the chain of events that brings this to an unfortunate conclusion, or at least an unfortunate outcome. I don't know what the conclusion is going to be, but I think we're in for some tough times in 2025 and 2026, and that's irrespective of everything else that's going on. And so what troubles me in my mind is I look at the international situation and I look at the domestic situation, and I'm almost rooting for somebody who can help us remove the cancer that populates our federal government. And I throw both parties into that mix, to be brutally honest with you. There's not a whole lot of difference between some people on the Democratic side and some people on the Republican side. They're useful idiots to a great degree. And I think we're gonna have to exercise our rights under the Second Amendment in terms of protecting what is ours. And I'm not advocating the overthrow of the government. I'm not advocating any of that aspect. I simply want to be left alone to live my life the way I choose to live it. And I know that that's not going to come without a shoving match.
Hey, before we move on,
Restoration is not revolution.
But before we move on, I wanted to say, Peter, you took off a little early. I hope you're still out there listening. But thanks for the question, man. We appreciate you coming by. And yeah, man, I wish I had better news for you on that front. Just continue to try and make your community safe. And in my opinion, ignore the federal for now. Literally as much as possible. Try and make it irrelevant. I think that's our only path forward.
So I wanted to add a couple of things in there. I wanted to throw something in there while he was in here, because this is something that trying to think of how to say this without coming off a little too crass. But, here it is. Everybody wants a one and done solution, right? Pump the brakes. Let's stop. Let's wake up tomorrow. Everything will be, rolling back to 1985 or whatever, right? Like, no, I'm sorry. It's not happening. Okay. It's not going to happen. If you listen, and this is for everybody. Look at every struggle that has occurred where people were oppressed, right? Where people were oppressed. There's a very strong case for oppression in America, and it's not the usual identity groups. Okay. It's a generational struggle. The responsibility is on you, first of all, to stand your ass up and do something about it. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get some miracle pie in the sky solution at the end of the day. And I'm going to point something else out. So Trump's getting arraigned. So the whole basis behind, well, this will happen to Trump. And then what are we going to do? I'm not going to do a damn thing. You know why? Because Trump didn't do anything for the people who were being held from January 6th. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't even addressed it. Okay. So, it is what it is. People can take it or leave it. I don't care either way. I know what I'm doing. Okay, you raise your children right. You get engaged at a local most level. You do what you can, and you understand that this is a long game. Okay, this is a long game. And I'm going to point something else out real quick, because I know we got somebody else in the chute. This thinking is indicative of people who are mostly rootless. Okay, they left one place where they had generational ties and they went somewhere else. Right now, I'm not faulting anybody for relocating for a variety of reasons. I get it, and it is what it is. But when you look at it in sociological terms, I leave one place, I uproot everything I have, I move to another, I break all those social bonds. And now all of a sudden, nobody knows me and I don't know them. I don't know who the power brokers are, the land barons, the banker across town. Nobody in the infrastructure. I don't know anyone and they don't know me. Okay. And so you can't get plugged into a local network on that implicit trust because nobody knows you. That's the way that it works. And because we've created these little castles for ourselves everywhere, right? These little enclaves here, there, and everywhere, right? We have all these little homes, cookie cutter homes that are all built around specific financial, socioeconomic status, demographics, and that's where you're going to live. They have all this stuff programmed down. The urban planning departments program all this, and they zone areas outside of cities for this very thing. And everybody lives in their little enclave with their doors shut, watching their entertainment on their TV and wherever else they get it. And they have no connection to the actual society, and they don't know the actual order of things. And so when they look to politics, all they see is the big man, right? The big man, the one in charge, and they want to change that. But they have no idea how the local infrastructure works. That's how here in North Carolina, we got a bunch of communists in at the local most level. And everybody else that's relocated here is kind of like like somebody in the middle of a trailer park after a tornado looking around, like, I don't know what the hell happened. It's because you don't understand the infrastructure, but they do on the left. And here's the thing too, all the people from the left that relocated, right? They're all young. They're all tech sector folks. They're all in their mid 30s or younger. They're generational. So if how do you counter that? You counter that by getting involved. That's how you do that. And don't look for any magic savior to come save you. That's not going to happen.
So
Agreed.
like,
Hey, I apologize,
wait.
gents, but the show runs on super chats, and we've got a bunch of them that we skipped over, so I gotta get them here real quick.
All right, go ahead, and then I want to expand on what Matt said.
Kevin Dorfer 5 says Jim Marshfield is the Irish Riviera. Probably true.
It's
Kevin
beautiful.
Dorr, PB trial judge ruled being held in jail prior to trial, they have no right to communicate with their lawyer without being listened to by the FBI.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to stand appeal, but it doesn't matter because the problem
that's
is
not gonna work.
It's going to take 2 years to adjudicate. All right.
Well, it also doesn't matter because they're going to keep doing it. And so
Correct.
they'll keep rolling this because the cost of defending the action is irrelevant to them. We pay it.
to the outcome. Correct.
Yeah. So Charlie Heathcott for $110, 110 Canadian. Okay, so like what? Like enough for a beer? I'm teasing. I'm
110
teasing, Charlie.
syrups.
Yeah, syrups. There we go. 110.
Whoa. I want to say, before you go any further with this, and I want to acknowledge Charlie and thank him for this. I don't want to castigate Canadian dollars. I don't want to.
No,
I don't want to castigate Canada because some of you know that I'm working on an updated map that's good. Sort of applicable.
Those Western Plains territories are calling to you, eh, Stan?
Yeah, and part of the rationale as it relates to the situation that we're discussing is that I think that there's enough like-minded people in parts of Canada that have resources that we're all interested in, that the redraw of this map is probably going to be extraterritorial to what is now the United States. So
I have said for a long time that Alaska must be made contiguous, but
Well, we're willing to liberate you in exchange for certain considerations. So
potentially maple considerations. Anyhow, love the combo, guys. Stan, the world can't handle your level of baseness. Also, you were watching your show earlier today when Watcher said there was some trouble at Trump Tower, but then you had to go back to work. Was that real or fake? Don't know. Haven't followed up on it. We're giving it a 48-hour rule.
It's real.
I can give you.
It's real, but it's a domestic dispute.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the events.
It was not an active shooter. It's just a woman going to shoot her husband for something he did, and they negotiated it out, and I believe it's resolved at this time. So
it's a big place, and there are a lot of people.
Yeah.
Then $2 from Lance Corporal Veteran. Correct. And then one more $2. Your $20 is skipped above. All right, Brian. Thank you. I'm sorry for that. Let me see if I can find it. It must have been in the middle of that gaggle of raid messages that were incoming.
I'll be honest, Brian. If it had been $50, it wouldn't have got skipped. Wink, wink. Just kidding.
No, come
There
on.
it is. There it is. Kevin Dorr for $20 says, today's left, the new left, are worse than communists. Communists at least believed in some positive vision, ill-conceived as it was. The postmodern left instead are nihilists. Their only goal is to destroy and destruction. I'll actually submit to you, Brian, that in fact, this is just mask off communism. They didn't actually believe in any of those positive visions. It was all cynically an attempt to gain power the entire time.
Well, but I will say this. I do think that he's touched on an important point, and that is the stripping away of even the basics of human values, and that is something that also happened during communism in the Soviet Union. But I just think that our society has been wound down to a point where there's no commonality, and Matt touched on some of this in terms of being, sort of grounded in where you live, and it takes effort. It just takes effort. Here's the question. So I've laid out my vision for what I think happens in the next, 24 or so months, and the adverse possibilities that happen there. And we've talked about, it's not enough just to hope that we're going to vote Trump back in and he's going to fix everything, or DeSantis, or anybody else for that matter. If you want to fix this, and here's the question you have to ask yourself: if you want to fix this being this country, this republic, this structure, you have to be committed to a 40 or 50-year effort to take back the institutions that we willingly gave up, education and other aspects of that, and reorder them and raise a couple generations of people who think as we think in that process in order to do this. Because that's what the left has done. That's what they've done successfully. They had a guide path to do it. And they had several, but the one that I'll as an example is Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. That book has done more damage than anything. And it's been the playbook for community organizers, wink, wink, nod, nod, and others to basically go in and tear down the institutions of our society over this period of time: education, religion, right on down the line, marriage, normal marriage. It's now been equated with, apostate behavior. My opinion. You don't have to agree with me, and I certainly don't have to agree with you if you've got the other side of this. And so I think that's what you've got to commit to save the corporal body of the United States of America in the context of it being a place where 50% of us want to live in the manner in which we want to live. And there is no corresponding counterpoint for Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals in the literature of the right. And a lot of guys, Joe Dolio has done a great job of telling you how to prepare for that period of time when you get punched in the face by the left because they won't leave you alone. Okay? And you need to read it, and you need to do it, and it's necessary sort of stuff. But I posit to you all that there's a need to go one step beyond that. And this really sort of came out for the first time on that podcast on Radio Contra a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about this, the shooting and the lack of response from the Christian community, and particularly the leaders of the Christian community, when a Christian school was targeted by a transgender person who then became the victim of this narrative in true Saul Alinsky fashion. And it started off with my notion that I didn't want to turn the other cheek on this. This was something that I wanted to be sort of more Old Testament about in our collective response. And I don't see that happening. And so I just wonder if there's a place in the marketplace of ideals for a book that sort of is the counter to Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, that is a guidebook for those on the conservative end of the agenda to do the things that Peter Provenzano was talking about doing, to do the things that I'm doing, to do the things what Matt's doing, to do the things that other people are trying to do. A, just first solidify your community, and B, push back against this Leviathan that's going to squeeze all the oxygen out of this republic that was given to us by people a couple hundred years ago. Ben Franklin said, a republic if you can keep it. The question is, do you want to keep it? Or do you want to keep at least some of it? And so I think there's a place in the literature on the right for what I'll call rules for rationals. And a game book that is, I'm not going to write it, not going to write all of it. I may write some of it. People like Joe may contribute to it. People like Matt may contribute to it. People like other council members may contribute to it. But I think we've got, and keep in mind, I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it's central to the issue, and that Saul Alinsky dedicated Rules for Radicals to Satan. If you don't believe me, look it up. And I just wonder whether or not there's a rule, there's room in our hierarchy of literature for a tome that tells you how to be proactive to protect those things that you hold dear to you. I'm assuming you think like I do, mostly, like Joe does. Joe wears it on his sleeve all day, every day. How many Bible classes do you teach a week? Joe?
5.
He's
5 different Bible studies. Yep.
He's walking the walk and he's talking the talk. Okay. So I just, is there a need for something that says, this is how you organize your thought. This is how you take what they're doing to you and you turn it back on them. Because absent that, I don't see enough critical mass, even among correct thinking people who are well motivated, to stand up effectively, short of force of arms, to what you're being faced with in the construct of the capture of institutions, the judiciary, the education system, the corporate boardroom, the federalization of government, okay? Squeezing out state and local in favor of federal regulations. I don't see that happening organically. And maybe we ought to tell people how to go about doing it. I'm interested. Anybody want to come in and comment on that? That would be welcome at this particular point.
We've actually, so we're a little over 2 hours at this point, but we've had our last guest in the pipeline. He was actually the first to sign up, but he was having audio issues. Everybody, please welcome Rick, Duke of Malta.
Hey, gang. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
Rick. Yep, can hear you. We can see you.
Good. So, a little bit off topic. I did come with a prepared question, which has to do mostly with what happened with Finland yesterday, and with Stoltenberg talking about how NATO was going to be, assimilating the Ukraine after they won. And I just wanted to get some thoughts on how you guys perceive that.
I'll go first.
First of
I'll go
all, Rick,
I went first.
salute, brother. Salute.
I'll go first. Isn't listening to other people's fantasies interesting sometimes? I personally found it to be a giant wish list of things that aren't going to happen, because the primary thing which must happen in order for that to happen is for Ukraine to win.
Right.
It's not.
Well, let's break this down a couple different ways. Rick, and let's say, who's going to continue to pay for NATO in that format?
I say that every time.
Because we can't. I got news for you. I got news for Zelensky. We can't. All right. We're going to face some hard choices from a financial perspective on the glide path we're on. As interest on the national debt is going to exceed the defense budget in the not too distant future, within 2 years on the current pace, depending upon what interest rates do. We can't continue. They've had an 80-year run of living off our dime. We can't continue to do it. And we certainly can't continue to do that and rebuild Ukraine at the same time.
But with people
Right.
like Lindsey Graham in the Senate, and McConnell, although McConnell's in a hospital, so there's that. But guys like Ladybugs is, pushing for all this. Even Eye Patch McCain, all are, have their fingers in the trough that
Yeah.
grip.
I think, Rick, and I'd like Jim to comment on this as well, because I think he and I have talked about this. I think that, so I'll take you back to what I said earlier about the war drum beating as it relates to Taiwan. Okay. And you should know that as we speak, there's a Chinese
Yes.
aircraft carrier battle group off the coast of Taiwan.
Mhm.
And they had talked about a resolute response to this meeting between McCarthy and Obi-Wan Kenobi, or whatever her name is. And so we are not in a position. It's just factual. We're not in a position to fight a two-front war at this particular point.
Lincoln already said it.
Said differently, we're not in a position, even if we didn't get involved in Ukraine, we're not in a position to pay for Ukraine's war while we go fight a war in Taiwan.
And that doesn't even include the southern border, which is, without question, an invasion.
Yeah, it never does include the southern border. And so, I just don't think that, I think that NATO is living off borrowed time, because I don't see the Europeans who are in Beijing kissing Xi's ass as we speak. That's Macron and Ursula von der Leyen saying,
And
please
that
don't.
one German
Please
minister said for the American soldiers to leave. It reminded me of when France kicked us out of France. Now they didn't kick us out of NATO, but they
they left NATO. They left NATO for a period of time and then came back in.
Maybe that's what happened.
And so I think that woman's, I think she may be the new face of European rationalism, in the context of saying, maybe we do need to bring our people home, and maybe we do need to take the troops that are stationed in Germany and put them on the southern border. I don't think NATO is going to, if we're forced to cut back our commitment to NATO, financial and otherwise, NATO's done. It doesn't make a difference if Finland and Sweden are part of it or not, because they just don't have the muscle to cash the checks that the Baltic dwarfs continue to write. In terms
that's exactly my point, is that here we have people speaking like this, and there's not, everybody else doesn't think like we do, or the council or the chat and the wonderful people that I've met in the last year, been able to interact with, that seem to be, I wouldn't say we're like exactly an echo chamber or a circular firing squad or anything to that magnitude, but we do seem to see that when people say stuff, sometimes we have to believe them. And sometimes we don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Well, but I think there's a long-winded way to get to the end of my point, so let me make that, and then I'll have. Yeah. So no, I was the one who was sort of going on and on, but I think that what that says is that I think a lot of the people who are in the corridors of power in the United States, and I think this cuts across both political parties.
It does.
I think they see the end of this grift in sight. Okay, for a variety of reasons. And I think that they're just accelerating to get to the end of the tunnel and make as much money as they can from this before the wheels come off.
Okay.
I really believe that that's the case. I really believe that that's what underlies so much of this bellicose behavior and ridiculous bellicose talk. And that is, I think they see a scenario where the dollar is reduced in its status, and so things are going to be more expensive at home. We're going to have inflation, I think, for a long period of time. There's nothing transitory about it at this point.
No, and unfortunately, I'm old enough to have lived through.
As am I.
Those years.
As am I. My first mortgage was at 16%.
14 for me.
Yeah. So I've seen this movie, and so but I think these guys are all trying to stack it as high as they can before the wheels come off. I think it's just that basic human behavior that's at work in terms of what they're doing, how they're doing it, what the repercussions are going to be. And that's the most cynical aspect of it that there can be, is they're not acting out of a sense of acting on behalf of the governed. They're acting on a sense of acting on their own behalf as the governors
Exactly.
in order to pad their nest so that when the shit really hits the fan, they're not as bad off as everybody
And
else.
that and getting to that point of where the shit is going to hit the fan goes back to what you guys were saying earlier about when is somebody going to stand up and actually do something besides go to a school board meeting. But are we going to get? Are we?
Understand this. I'm not denigrating anybody that goes to. You got to.
No. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean denigrating. I meant it as in not a lot of value, as a point of they can ignore them, blow them off. But what I'm more concerned about is what we're seeing with, I guess I could use the words national divorce, and that kind of context where would we? Do you actually see us taking arms against each other again? Any of you, Matt?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Watcher?
Unavoidably.
Well, I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. But it's a very scary thing. And all the stuff that's talked about in Joe's books and even the novels. Oh, by the way, Joe, when is TWO5 coming out?
Oh, I knew it.
Oh, my SKS.
I knew that was the whole reason you were coming on here. But listen, I just said in the chat, for your appearance with the flag and the hat, I'm hand delivering you that book, brother. I am coming down there with that book.
Well, you come on down. I'll take you a ride in my new getaway.
Sounds good.
Ron shut me down today because I was going to post a picture of my get out of town rig, which is it's a 99 Rambler. Jeep TJ, which is set up high, nice. Winch.
I mean, send that to me in a DM, man. I'd love to see it.
I would do it nice. In a DM. So, and I was like looking around for something that was small and maneuverable, and I found it, and I pulled the trigger on it, literally, because believe it or not, one of the reasons that I really wanted is down the road from me. There's two places where I can shoot my long guns. So anyway, that's off the topic. But as far as Finland and being the longest contiguous border with Russia, what can we expect out of Mr. Putin?
I think he's got a lot on his plate right now. I think that they'll shift some forces around. They'll do some things, but I don't look for that. Look, Finland got into NATO and immediately voted out of office the prime minister, the party chick, and so she's no longer in government. So I think the Finns are they're probably pretty happy that they're in NATO. I think they're also probably pretty happy not to ever have to call on NATO if they don't have to. And so I don't think,
How does that work exactly?
Well,
they're going to have to cough up a percentage of their GDP.
Well, but to be honest, the Finns have done a pretty good job of that on their own.
So, and I mean, we do know what happened in World War II in 41 when they fought the Russians.
Yeah, let's not extrapolate what happened in 41, 39 to 41. We all get guilty of fighting the last war, and things are different.
Well, yeah.
The Finns make good decisions, Rick. And I think that's what sets them apart in kind of the Europe Slavic world. They make really, really good decisions because they're disciplined.
Mhm.
And, they fly the F-18. There are not a lot of folks in Europe who made that choice. I think
Are
the
they
Swiss,
relatively homogenous though?
yeah, they're pretty put
I mean,
together.
they're not like
No,
overloaded with the immigrants that came over
no,
from
they're
Africa.
not.
They're not Sweden.
No, they're Finns, and they've got the Lap folks in the north, and they get along quite well. They're sociologically really effective, right? And the
Mhm.
government is competent. The folks I've engaged with over 20 years are very put together guys and girls.
Well, this is all encouraging to me.
No, but if somebody's got to do it right, they've done a good job. They'll make a good ally, and I don't think they make that decision quickly. It's taken them a while, and they've been on the frontier. It's not like they've been in a place that was easy.
No,
They're kind of like India. They're a country that's abutting somebody who's fairly aggressive, but they've done a good job. So bring them aboard. They're going to spend the money. They have a domestic capacity that exceeds most people in Europe. So bless their hearts, welcome aboard. And if you want to go hunt moose, they'll show you how to cook it. It's
well, let's let them take our place.
yeah, they're doing it. They just took on. They just doubled their border demands. I mean, think about it. Overnight, they went from these irritating people who once beat us to these irritating people who are preparing to deal with us one more time. It's gonna be a bitch for the Russians.
Well, that's
So be it.
not it's not my problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really don't want it to be my problem, and that is
Good.
why
So
I have
welcome to the Finns.
that's why I've been so adamant about us leaving there and getting out. I've been actually saying this since the fall of the Soviet Union and the reunification in Germany. I spent 11 years in Europe, 3 in Italy and 8 in Germany, and we were like, I loved it. It's great, but when it's time to go, it's time to go. And what blew up in the last year is a perfect reason why it was time to go.
Yeah.
And even Trump, as much as I am ambivalent, is a good word, for a New York carpetbagger, that that he actually went to them over that conference table. There's that video of him telling them to cough it up. And, we're not going to be doing this all the time. But
Yeah.
nothing really came of it that we, now I think Trump is basically just a big distraction now. I don't know, frankly, if he could really become president because his base is there. And I just don't know all the other people, that are going to be looking at him, because all they're going to do is criminalize him for the next several months, next year. So there's that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Rick. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that Watcher and I had so much difficulty getting through, but
Well, I'm glad you got it done. Thank you very much.
It is.
Yeah,
for sticking it out, man. So
Confederate History Month.
It is that.
Amen.
Although
Fail in DC.
It's Confederate History Day. I hear every day.
I sort of got that. Yeah.
I tip my hat to you, gentlemen.
Be well.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
man.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
We'll see you, Rick.
Anything else we got, Watcher, or are we
Legend.
going to wrap up?
That's
Yeah.
it. That's all that was in the pipeline, my friend. And we are we're a half hour over the 2-hour mark, which puts us a whole hour over. I think this is the longest episode so far.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what happens when you go unplugged. Because we did 3 hours the other night on Radio Contra, and it didn't feel like 3 hours at all. So.
No.
Yeah, it did not feel like 3 hours at all.
It did not.
So
Rick's a great guy.
yeah,
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
Rick.
Dude's a legend, man. I love it. Oh,
So-
that's awesome.
I'm going to be honest,
I,
though. That is not what I envisioned Rick looking like at all. And it's a good thing.
You know, you
no,
said it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I'd like to thank everybody in our viewing audience that participated both in the chat and by actually going through the process to call in. I think we've got this system. We may think about streamlining it a little bit in terms of some other aspects of this, but I think it works reasonably well, and we'll continue to do this. We'll do this once a month. There'll be an open line Wednesday once a month, and lead into that in terms of topics du jour. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy putting names and faces together, names that I've seen in the chat for a year now, a year plus at this particular point. And I think that's great. I think it helps build community, even though we're scattered all over the country. It does help build community. And that's, as Matt has said, and Jim has said, and Joe has said, and I've sort of belabored. We got to do that. We got to build community. I need to know if I'm in Florida, there's a dude I can rely on down there with a Confederate flag on the wall and a whatever. So so I just think that's an important aspect. Yeah, and it's an important aspect of one of the things we're trying to do here, as well as educate people. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time. We'll see you again next week. We are going to do something on the Restrict Act. I just didn't want to do it off the cuff because I think it's too important. I think that it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, just like the Patriot Act was, but probably more so. But I want to be a little more dialed in and a little bit more specific on that aspect of it, because I think it's I think it's a big camel's nose under the tent again, and it's going to make our lives more difficult, not less. And TikTok is what TikTok is. I'd love it if TikTok weren't around, but we've all been fed a bill of goods on other threats that we've given away. We've knowingly given away our rights to try to defend ourselves against. And if people are dumb enough to use TikTok, then I don't know what to tell you. It's if you know everything that you have heard about TikTok and you continue to use it,
there's not much I can do for you. Yeah,
not much I can do for you. You can still smoke cigarettes too. So it's a choice. Enjoy. And with that, let's take it out for this evening. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again next week.